Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the New Normal, your go-to source for insightful discussions on the gaming industry and critical issues impacting Native American tribes across the United States. I'm Victor Rocha, and joining me is my co-host, Jason Giles, Executive Director of the Indian Gaming Association. Good morning, Jason.
Morning.
Today, we're talking to our good friends, Tress York from the American Gaming Association, and Howard Glaser from Light and Wonder. Good morning, gentlemen. What a glorious day. What is the sun woke up, it was shining, and it was so you know what, let's jump right into it. I'm sure everybody else. Let's talk about what has gone on yesterday. Howard, you were the first person that I saw yesterday. You dubbed it Black Tuesday, which I think that's starting to stick, my friend. You're the first one. So let's jump into this thing right away. Sorry, I moved my notes up. So let's start with let's talk about sweepstakes, and let's kind of go back chronologically. Let's start yesterday with Louisiana. Now this was a wild one. As you know, we've been on the New Normal, Jason and I, since October, have been raising the awareness for sweeps, and I think a lot of us were shocked at how brazen this industry was and the bald-faced lies that they use. Now, for me personally, there's people in this industry that I respected and admired, and it just felt like a total betrayal. People that have worked in the commercial gaming industry for years and years and years. All of a sudden, they're sticking all their money and reputation on sweepstakes gaming, and for a moment there, it looked like they might succeed. But according to everything that's happened in the last week, let's talk about Louisiana. What happened yesterday in Louisiana, gentlemen?
Which
Howard,
gentleman would you like to address it?
Yeah, which one? Go ahead, Howard.
I did that on purpose. I wanted to see
Yeah.
who was gonna jump through.
No, we're very deferential. Well, I'll jump in there. Louisiana. Well, I'm going to back up for 1 second, if that's okay, Victor, because I think this is an interesting moment. It was about a year ago that the American Gaming Association issued their policy statement on sweepstakes games. Prior to that time, there was very little attention to this rapidly growing market. One state had taken action. As of yesterday, fast forward about a year to what happened yesterday, there are now 16 states that have issued hundreds of cease and desist orders, legislation to ban sweeps introduced and passed, or issued other regulatory or attorney general actions. That is, in a 1 year period, not an easy thing to accomplish, but I think it also demonstrates that there's an understanding among regulators and lawmakers that the casino regulatory system that they have built trust in over 30, 40 years now, that integrity is significantly threatened by unregulated, untaxed entities that can just swoop into a state, deploy products that look and play close to a legal product. Consumers don't know that the product is not legal. And, that's damaging to the overall system as well. So I think it's an interesting moment. And the Louisiana was a little bit of kind of the capstone of that, because you had a legislature that unanimously passed a bill that would ban sweepstakes and hold different parties accountable for sweepstakes. The governor vetoed that bill shortly thereafter for reasons having more to do with just internal legislative politics. You saw the sweepstakes advocates declare victory. Hooray, the governor vetoed the bill, we're off the hook. They didn't read the governor's veto message, because in it he says, not only is it illegal already, our attorney general and our gaming commission will continue to take enforcement actions. And yesterday, that's what happened. That despite the veto, you saw over 40 cease and desist orders issued by the Louisiana Gaming Commission in conjunction with the attorney general. And there's no more, you don't hear much out of the sweepstakes advocates at this point. So, it's an interesting move from last year. And Trace York was critical in this, the AGA policy statement, to yesterday. No matter whether it's legislation or regulation, every single state that has weighed in has determined that sweepstakes gaming is illegal under their law and has taken these different kinds of actions. So that was an interesting day yesterday, and that was only one part of it.
What a day. I think we were all, but what was interesting, I think all of us, all of that, I don't think I read that veto statement very well either, because I was like the opposite of Bart. I was just like, shaking my head, and I saw it and I read it, but when it dropped, I was surprised, and I was like, oh, they're listening. I think everyone thought maybe they were just gonna, the whole idea was they hired this new special lobbyist by VGW, and they're gonna come in and they're the drinking buddies or something like that. But that wasn't the case. I think you're right. And by the way, before I go any further, let's give credit where credit's due. I mean, you two gentlemen have been on the front lines of this from the beginning. And Howard, you seem to be the sweepstakes punching bag. So they always
Wait,
come
does
at
that mean
you.
I'm getting punched or I'm doing the
Yeah,
punching?
no,
What
they're
does
always
that mean
punching at
exactly?
you. They're like, Howard and Light and Wonder are the ones. They're only doing this because they're the only ones that are going to win over this, and they're killing innovation. And Howard doesn't like innovation. Howard, why don't you like innovation? Tell us now.
It's always funny to hear that argument made, because take Louisiana, because we're talking about it. This is a very unique thing. Every casino in the state and the video game terminal industry, the video poker in the bars and restaurants, they don't agree on anything. They both supported this bill. And what's called the Family Forum. Family Forum is a very conservative organization in Louisiana that is opposed to the casinos and the VGTs. They also agreed. So this isn't one company that's just ridiculous. This is the entire casino industry, the digital, land-based, responsible lending advocates. There are very few issues that I have seen since I've been in this industry that every aspect, every segment of the industry is united on. And I think this will shortly include the tribes as well, tribal gaming as well. And this is united support everywhere. It's not about one company. It's about the assault on the integrity of the gaming system. And that's a very big issue, I think, for Indian sovereignty. You have exclusivity in theory. You now have illegal online gaming taking place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the state of California, accessible to every resident on their phone all day long. And that puts the theory, it just makes a mockery of the whole system. And I think it's the reason why you're seeing the reaction across the industry that you are.
Yeah. Tress, it doesn't seem like that dual coin model is really carrying them as far as they thought they were, do they? Is it?
Not at this point. It's a situation where over the past 12 months or so, we've looked at this and obviously engaged with regulators and state attorneys general on this issue very frequently. I'm actually at the annual meeting of the Attorney General Alliance right now, where
Thank
obviously
you
this
so
is a
much for
frequent.
joining the webinar too,
It's a
Tress. I know.
Thanks, Trace.
appreciate the time. And so, we're constantly having these conversations, and I think that what you're clearly seeing, as Howard mentioned, is that every single regulator or attorney general who has investigated these operations have unequivocally made the determination that this is illegal gambling. This is not Trace York saying that. This is not Howard Glaser saying that. This isn't Victor. These are the gaming regulators and the state attorneys general that are making that determination. And the term innovation is thrown around a lot, and we're stifling innovation, and something that everyone should bear in mind is that innovation doesn't equal legality. And so, when you think about it from that standpoint, it's quite comical in some ways when they start throwing those types of arguments around. And so, from a fundamental standpoint, the dual currency system and trying to create this business model that is some sort of alleged sweepstakes in order to offer iGaming in most of the country, and including in California, including in Texas, clearly trampling all over the regulatory system that the legal gaming industry is in, as well as tribal sovereignty. They thought that this is going to be the way to do it. And what you have seen, again, when the arbiters of legality, regulators and state AGs have taken a look at this, is they've looked at that business model and said, we're not buying it. It is clear to them in their determinations that the sweepstakes model, or what they claim to be a sweepstakes model, is a facade, and it is an exploitation of the law in order to offer gaming which had not been authorized, or if it had been authorized, they are not licensed to do it in the jurisdictions in which they were operating. And so it's a very, prior to the last 12 months where more scrutiny was brought, I'm sure they thought it was a very clever system. This is very clever. We found out a way to do it, and the regulators and the state AGs that have looked at it so far have said this is a little too cute by half, guys. Like it's very cute, it's very clever, but we're not buying it. We're not buying it. This is simply illegal gambling, and that's just the way it is. This is a direct quote from a press release. Online sweepstakes casinos are illegal, dangerous, and can seriously ruin people's finances. Another one. These so-called sweepstakes games are unscrupulous, unsecure, and unlawful. Those two quotes, the first one was from the Attorney General of New York, and the second one was from the chairman of the New York Gaming Commission. So this isn't just, folks running around saying things out loud and hoping it sticks. These are the folks that are charged with protecting the public that are making these determinations. And so, innovation is great. The legal gaming industry innovates all the time. But innovation does not always equal legality, and we have a system of rules and a regulatory structure in this country that you have to go through in order to offer gambling to the public. And there are some people who do that and comply with those laws and regulations as they should, and there are others who just don't feel like they need to for whatever reason. And as you're seeing this momentum build, they may be thinking twice about that.
And you know what, you speaking of momentum, then let's talk about New York. Then, since you mentioned New York, so and there is momentum here, because then I want to talk about New York, and I want to talk about Connecticut, but let's go for New York now. New York was another one that was very fascinating. Now, unlike computer, I actually know that you guys are on the road almost all the time. It's just absolutely ridiculous how much you guys travel. Howard, Tress, you guys are amazing, But you guys did a lot of work in New York, laying that groundwork. Let's talk about New York. What happened in New York? And this was on Monday? Now we're waiting for the governor's signature, right?
You've had a series of activities in New York. New York is not the fastest moving bureaucracy that has been known to mankind. You want to change a street sign, it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to change a street sign that's non-controversial in New York. So there has been a pretty rapid reaction that is, justified by what we've seen happen in the marketplace. Several things happened. First, the Gaming Commission several months ago made referrals to the Attorney General's office, basically stating it's illegal gaming. And in New York, it's the Attorney General that needs to take the enforcement action. The Attorney General's office sent out over 24 cease and desist letters. They did not publicize this. But you knew that happened because a couple of weeks later, at the end of March, you saw sweepstakes companies announce that they were exiting New York. For no particular reason, they were going to exit New York. Of course, they were doing so because they'd received these notices. Some companies pushed back a little bit. And then finally, the Attorney General just a couple of weeks ago said that they had received agreement from every company to cease operation under penalty of further enforcement action. To add to that, at the same time, Senator Joe Adabo and Assemblywoman Carrie Warner, two very sophisticated legislators, put forth legislation that would add enforcement powers, ban sweepstakes, as I mentioned earlier, hold accountable investors, hold accountable suppliers, financial institutions that were facilitating this. That bill passed the Senate 57-2, and then the bill yesterday passed the full assembly in what is really a torturous process to go through in New York, unanimously, bipartisan support, 140 to nothing. That bill goes to the governor. That bill is of great concern to the sweepstakes advocates because it so clearly defines liability for sweepstakes with those that are facilitating it, the entities that are facilitating it. Because the truth be told, the sweepstakes companies themselves, they're just operating the app. I mean, I'm not saying it's not complicated, but they've got to be funded. And if the funding source is choked off, then they can't operate. And what that bill is designed to do is to say, if you're providing funding knowingly to an operation that's engaged in illegal gambling, then you are equally liable almost as the operator. And so that's a pretty tough message from the New York State Legislature. I expect we're going to see a lot of pushback from the financial community that's involved in these games, underestimated the risk that was involved. They were all told this is risk-free. Obviously wasn't. They'll push back. They'll try to push the governor to veto the bill. We'll see how it comes out. But like Louisiana, you've got two different ways to skin this cat. The attorney general is taking action, can take further action. So what happens with the bill is just another avenue that adds some additional tools. So I think either way, New York is a market that we've already seen 15 companies pull out of because of where it is today.
Wow.
And
what do you think, Jace?
Howard, real quick, the problem in the past is it was a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
And you think that the way they're approaching this, because that's something Victor and I raised with some payment processors, that advertise at our IGA trade show, and we don't want to, they're our friends. But
Sure.
when they facilitate this kind of money transaction to these sweepstakes games, we had a problem with them. So you think that this this is the mechanism. So how you stop that sort of whack-a-mole, just another one popping up over here and another one over here.
Jason, it's a great question, and I think in part the answer is it depends. What happens in California, in Texas, in Florida? Do they follow the New York lead? Because a number of states have acted, and as a percentage of market, they're substantial, but the individual states, are only a portion of it. But the ball game is these large states, and so I fully expect that we'll see in California, Texas, Florida, we'll see similar action, and that will begin to create some national uniformity. Until then, it is a little bit of whack-a-mole. Unlike, and I know we don't want to go into prediction markets right now, but I will say that the flip side of a fragmented federalist system of gaming regulation is you have 45 or 50 regulators. And so if you are successful here, then you got to go over there. If you have one national rule, it's binary. You can either do it or not do it. That's what the prediction market discussion is about. That's why that one has moved so quickly, because that's going to become potentially a national rule one way or another through federal law. Sweepstakes has been different thus far. It's a state-by-state analysis, and it depends on the big states at the end of the day.
And by the way, I'm hearing from very good sources that there's some legislation happening in California. I think you're going to hear something in the next couple of weeks. So that thing is moving. Still waters run deep in California.
Go ahead, Travis. What were you going to say?
Well, so everything Howard said was right, and obviously the big states are going to be important. But one trend that I'll mention, kind of to your point, in this kind of game of whack-a-mole, it is to some extent a whack-a-mole game. However, there is this trend that is happening. Obviously, the legislative front is the most certainty. I mean, if a sweepstakes ban bill gets signed into law, then that's more or less the ball game. The industry as a general whole will pull out. But even on the regulatory side, you can cite good examples of the state through the gaming regulator and or their attorney general's office that are playing hardball with these operators who they receive a cease and desist letter, and then they pay their attorneys to send some, nonsense legal opinion and they go back and forth on this for months at a time. The states that have stood strong on this and say we're gonna take you to court and we have the enforcement actions under law to go after you, that message has resonated beyond just perhaps the companies that they have directly engaged with, where there, in some cases, you have seen the broader market that just proactively pull out. You kind of saw that with Connecticut, where there has been a lot going on in Connecticut, but Connecticut has stood very firm. You've seen that with Maryland, where now if you start looking through the terms and conditions on a lot of these operators' websites, Maryland is in many cases added to it. You may see this with Louisiana. You clearly saw this with Michigan to begin with, where their laws are written. Not only are their laws written well, but the attorney general and the gaming regulator are not going to sit around and dance around the issue. They're standing firm and they're willing to go through the enforcement process, including taking the case to court. And once that reality is made clear, then all of a sudden you see more than one operator that are pulling out of the state and end up complying. And then it kind of ends up becoming an anti-sweepstakes state. But that has not always been the case. It might have been an individual operator here or there, but that kind of broader narrative that some of these states are building has kind of pushed the broader sweepstakes market out of individual states. And so that has been an interesting trend to just observe, and B, also shows that while it can be in some cases a whack-a-mole system, when the state stands firm and makes it very clear that they're willing to play hardball, all of a sudden it becomes less a game of whack-a-mole, because then the broader industry itself just ends up moving out after receiving cease and desist letters and pushing back. So it is kind of an interesting trend to see, and a good one.
And I think to that point, Trace, the interesting thing is there hasn't been success for the sweepstakes companies in any state where this issue has arisen.
Yep.
So there's not like a trend line where you can say, well, okay, we lost 15 states because it's 15, 16 states right now. The next ones will be different. That's not going to happen. And one way it's not going to happen, a point Trace has made earlier in our conversations, is that how many companies have challenged these state cease and desist orders or the state regulatory actions? Zero. There's been no legal challenge whatsoever. You hear a lot of big talk that that the sweepstakes model is operating legally under state law within the rules of promotional sweepstakes that were designed as raffles for nonprofits, and they're fitting in there. And they say, so we're legal, and this is how they have pulled the eyes over, I believe, their investors. And I think there's risk for some of these sweepstakes companies that went to investors and they had some phony legal opinion that said, hey, this is legal in the state, you have no risk. Well, it turns out that's been wrong in every single case. And they haven't stood behind it by challenging any of this in court, different than you see in the prediction markets, right? Kalshi right away goes in and stands behind their legal case. That's what makes that interesting. Couldn't be more different in sweepstakes. They will not put their lawyers where their public relations people mouth is.
And that's funny because Kalshi really does show how bad these guys are and their strategy and their tactics of, you say whack-a-mole, I think it's more like a cockroach running when the light turns on, and you see these guys just scattering, but they're not getting any of the inertia. They don't have the backing of Kalshi. They don't have, what I mean? So I think Kalshi just really highlights how illegal and how bad these guys are. And things are obviously going against them now, so I think that is just terrible for them. So I know that those guys are just like, that celebration from Louisiana the other day was really funny because today, they're crying. Let's talk about Connecticut now. So now we have Connecticut. And by the way, Jason, I didn't even put Michigan here because Michigan has been churning out cease and desist letters every week.
Yeah.
It was like 5 the other day, 10 the week before that. So Michigan is just shooting them things out, man. So let's talk about Connecticut because Connecticut is also really interesting. And one of the things that we've talked about before is out everybody's solution has seemed to be a little different. They seem to be coming together now, but everyone has approached it different. And I think a lot of it has to do with I think the state attorney generals are like the rest of us. They were surprised at first. They didn't know what was going on underneath their nose. Once they get the information that you gentlemen have been knocking on every doors and giving them this information, they wake up and understand the threat that's been happening in their own home state. Now, Connecticut was also really great. I mean, they've gone a different route and they've also have teeth in their rulings. What happened in Connecticut?
I think two things in particular happen in Connecticut, and they're kind of they make two of the broader points in this whole thing, and putting the legislation aside for a moment in time. Going back a couple of months, they sent a cease and desist letter to the largest sweepstakes operator in the United States, and they had the normal back and forth for about 6 months or so until finally the Department of Consumer Protection and the AG's office got fed up with it and said, we're tired of this. You guys are operating illegally, and we're going to see you in court. We're going to have full disclosure. We're going to have financials all over the courtroom table, and we're going to take this to court and bring it before a judge. And as soon as they made that threat, and it was clear that it was a credible threat, the company pulled out. And so that illustrates number one, again, I mentioned earlier, but kind of that firm stance, being willing to go that extra mile. We're not sitting here. We're not going to negotiate with you. We've investigated it. This is illegal gambling. If you're not going to comply, we'll take you to court. So Connecticut did that, and they have been successful thereafter in cease and desist letters after that. The number two thing that I thought was particularly important to this broader discussion is we've been talking a lot about kind of the broader ecosystem that obviously supports this market. So there's the operators, but then obviously there's the payment processors, there's the suppliers, there's the affiliates, there's the investors, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things in my conversations with regulators and with state AGs have been look at who your licensees are. Because if you are giving gaming licenses in your state to certain companies or whatever, you can investigate them through various ways to make sure that your licensees are not providing support services to what you have determined to be illegal gambling. So, and if so, then a gaming license is a privilege. It's not a right. So they have the authority to what? Revoke the license. So in Connecticut, they actually put that to the test. There's a company called High Five Games, a gaming supplier that provided online iGaming
See their
content.
booths at G2E. You see them at
Yep,
ICE. They have the big booth, the
that's right.
same weak-looking booth they've had for years, by the way. So go ahead.
They were a licensed gaming supplier in Connecticut, provided online slot content and whatnot to the legal operators in Connecticut, and they again were licensed by the Department of Consumer Protection in Connecticut. On the other hand, they were also operating High Five Casino, which is a sweepstakes casino, and Connecticut had made it clear that sweepstakes gambling in Connecticut was illegal. And so they ended up revoking the gaming license for High Five Games for operating an illegal sweepstakes casino on the side, basically, and charged them with over 1,000 criminal counts of facilitating illegal gambling. Um, so the broader point of that is that there are additional pressure points that regulators and state AGs can look at when it comes to a gaming license, and Connecticut was one of the first states to really utilize that by going after the broader ecosystem and revoking an actual gaming license. And so those two things I think are particularly important. Stand firm, be willing to defend your position in court if it comes to that, and actually follow through on it, which I think most regulators at this point are willing to do. And then number two, look at your licensees. A gaming license is not a right. And if there are people who have a license in your state that are facilitating illegal gambling or what you determine to be illegal gambling, then you can do something about that. And then number three, obviously on the legislative side, there was legislation that was introduced to make this about as explicitly clear as possible. And that was passed and recently signed by the governor into law. So that anti-sweeps legislation has also passed. So kind of a long answer there, but between those
Great
number of
answer.
different things, Connecticut
Yeah,
is looking at a lot of really good stuff and pushing the envelope that other states can look at too if they need to.
It feels like people are the states are have a choice of weapons now. You know what I mean? You're starting to see a myriad of options that they're going against the sweeps. But Connecticut was really interesting because I also saw somewhere that High Five got tagged somewhere else in one of the other states. So I think
there's some class actions, but I will say this. I mean, a supplier like High Five is going to comply with state law. They're going to comply when a state regulator is explicit about it because they have licenses in those states and in other states. Every supplier would be the same way. So it's really just a matter of, will the state say what their intent and law is going to be, and then you've got the uniformity there. The other thing I would say about Connecticut is this, and I think this is relevant to California. It's a state of tribal exclusivity over casino gaming, and really it's Foxwoods and Mohegan in that state that had the most to lose over online sweepstakes casinos operating in the state, because they have that franchise exclusively in the state, and they've spent $1 billion plus, whatever the number is, on their facilities. And then for companies to come in, whether they're US based or overseas based, and operate 24 hours a day an online casino without any rules, basically, or any taxes, it's really an affront to the tribes. And I think that's one reason why you saw the Connecticut regulator react as strongly as they did, because it just can't be more obvious than that. And don't you think, Victor and Jason, don't you think that should be the situation in California? Let me ask you guys, how is California different than Connecticut? Why have we had a different result in California to date?
Well, California's turning their head to illegal gambling goes back longer than
listen, so what's happening in California is what you see. Like I said, there's I hear there's legislation being coming, and I think the frustration that the Californian tribes have with the attorney general, the fact that his lack of action is now tell us where his mindset is. And so, we're not ones to sit and wait around for someone. So, we're going to get this thing done, and I guarantee we'll have teeth, and listen, I'm sure, we talked about, before we started, about Andreessen coming out with a new sweepstakes company, or Andreessen Horowitz doing a sweepstakes for women, which always remind me on Amazon. I still go back to Amazon every once in a while to read the reviews on the Big Pen for her. And this whole thing, the women were talking about, oh my gosh, you can't sign checks for my husband until they created this pen for women, and it's one of the funniest things on the internet. It really, truly is. And that's what this kind of reminded me, very patronizing. It'll probably be pink and, pastels and women, animated characters and stuff like that. And so, the tribes have been outraged again, like everything else. It's taken a little while to get movement on it, but it's obviously very illegal. I think as the rest of the states have joined this, it's just a matter of time. So
Don't you think it's inevitable? It seems like it's inevitable in California. Yeah.
Absolutely. I went to Kalshi and made an event contract on it. So it could happen. It could happen.
Real quick, Howard, a lot of influence. Well, this SGLA, they were so bold as to create their own lobbying group, and a lot of people have put their names to it. And then, as you just bring up this Andreessen Horowitz, they're a big time player in
Fascism.
Yeah, fascism. But
yeah, big time.
Well, they don't want to lose money. They're not in the money losing business, and a lot of moneyed interests lined up behind this sweepstakes stuff, Howard. And I just don't understand.
Well,
is it just our lack of regulation? And in the past, we never really shut down offshore sports books. There's always been sort of a wink, wink.
Right. That's a very, very, very good point. And I think make two comments. First, more broadly, the offshore illegal gaming, particularly the sweepstakes illegal gaming, because it operated for some period of time basically unfettered and had this theory that it would be legal under sweepstakes law, that's become supplanted in terms of growth by US-based investment and US-based companies, as you guys are now referring to. And so we've seen this move into the space, particularly as iGaming, legal iGaming, hasn't been regulated or authorized except in a handful of states. It's left a void. The offshore markets were operating in it with impunity, and somebody came up with a good idea of it. It looks like we can do it here without penalties. So they miscalculated the risk on that, and it's clearly everyone has said it's gambling in every state. How you could be a sophisticated investor and not appreciate the risk that was involved, that you might be found to be illegal gambling. And I think the answer is, if it seems too good to be true, it's not going to be real. And the money was big, and the money was easy, and they had a couple of legal opinions that said, here's a legal opinion. It's just like running a raffle. It's just like Monopoly at McDonald's. It's just like a Starbucks card, except it's a casino. What's not to like? And, so investors came in and said, yeah, we'll buy that. And, even the most sophisticated ones can be blinded by the potential profitability here. And, people were out there with warning signals, careful about the risk. And you didn't see, real scrutiny of the position that they were taking. And now you're starting to pay the price. I don't want to talk about specific companies, but in general, that's what's happening. You're seeing U.S.-based investors coming in.
They use that battered spouse. You know what I mean? It's like your fault that I did this. You know what I mean? We're doing this because you guys haven't gone online. You know what I mean? You didn't do it, so we're going to come in and do it for you. You know what I mean? You made us do this. We didn't want to do it. You made us do this. So,
also I think, look, even the regulated companies, I won't speak for my company. If you're a regulated company and the state says you can operate in this market, whether it's sweepstakes or iGaming, you're going to come into the market. But you need to know first if it's going to be, acceptable to the state. And so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with sweepstakes gaming, by the way. If it's legal in the state, and that's clear with the regulator, then I think most suppliers that are members of American Gaming Association would look carefully at the issue. And that would be true of any regulated market. Talked about innovation earlier. All the companies that we work with are pro-growth, pro-regulated gaming. We believe that regulated gaming in one sector helps grow regulated gaming in other sectors. That has a positive benefit for both state and potentially tribal revenues. So this is not anti-growth. It's not anti-innovation. It's just about clarity on the rules.
I did. You know what? One of the things that you mentioned earlier, and part of this was, one of the things that Maryland did, I thought was interesting. I think when VGW, whatever they're called, VGW, when they left, they go, by the way, we'd like to see that legal opinion that somebody wrote for you that said that you could come into Maryland. And there's like, see ya, gotta go. Have they got that yet? Did they get that?
I have no
The answer is yes, and it's been rejected by the regulator.
Well,
The regulator
I think
says,
they changed their mind.
Well, I talked to an investor in sweepstakes. I talked to one of these guys, and he's a friend of mine. And, what he said was that, they were told this was legal. This was the thing they could do, and they invested in it, and they thought it was legal. They got an opinion from someone who said it was legal, and that's why they invested in it,
Yeah, that's what they'll say.
I think if you
Do better
rob a
due
bank,
diligence.
yeah, in the movie Heat, they rob a bank, but they didn't plan the bank robbery. They got the plan from somebody else. The guy, he said he get it from the heirs, and they gave him the plan. He's still complicit in the crime. You know what I mean? So I think the investors and these guys should be included in there. I've been very open about that since the very beginning. You know what I mean? If you're going to pay for the crime, if you're the one financing the crime, if it's a bank robbery or a drug deal or something like that, you're part of the criminal syndicate. So I know everybody doesn't think like that, and I know I'm a little whacked out, but that's kind of how I see it. So we'll see if that's coming. And I think some of the other states are looking at it like that too. Jason, wow.
Well, I mean, it's a long time coming for the sweepstakes, and there's still some work to do, and we'll keep pushing. And I know it's still sweepstakes is still big right across the river from DC and Virginia, so we'll see what they can do soon enough. And you know, but it does sort of when you get this brief that was filed yesterday by the Nevada, or I'm sorry, New Jersey, and then you had 32 states sign on in the case against Kalshi. That was also very heartening because some of the states that signed on, their own senators refused to say a word to the new nominee for the CFTC, and they're sitting there in a hearing knowing that this is going on, and now it's kind of looks like they're out of step with what their state is thinking about all these futures contracts and stuff, if they even understood it to begin with. But it's got to be frustrating for your members, Tress, the guys who have played by the rules since day one. And then from, if you just think about it for a second from the tribal perspective, tribes were hammered decades ago because they opened bingo sites. And I mean, police, all kinds of, attorney general actions to stop bingo on the reservation within the tribe's own jurisdiction. And, that had to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. But now with this, Kalshi, again, Howard, to your point, they're calling it innovation. And when the CFTC said they were going to allow this stuff, all they did was, send out a paragraph long thing, and they blamed the Biden administration for lack of innovation. And so now here we are again, having to deal with this stuff that is just blatantly gambling to the point where they advertise it as sports betting, and right in your own backyard. And these folks, I was glad to see, the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association signed on to the tribal brief, because some of these states, their hypocrisy will catch up to them every time, Victor. Whether it's Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma, they just can't avoid their hypocrisy catching up to them. And all those times, you look at what the Porch Creek Band of Indians has adored in Alabama, and then they have a senator on the Senate Agriculture Committee who didn't even raise a word about any of what's being offered out there. I mean, Howard, how does this change the playing field a little bit in terms of, I came out of that hearing so depressed because the CFTC is only going to have one commissioner for 3.5 years. The president will not appoint another one. That's just guaranteed. He's doing that with a lot of the independent commissions. He's just not going to fill them. So, but I think at this point, maybe the courts will come to the rescue again here. What do you think?
Well, Trace is the expert on prediction markets, but I'll make a couple observations. One, which I think you mentioned slightly, is that the amicus briefs that were filed in this case were from dozens of states with attorney generals of both parties. Mm-hmm. We have very rarely, if ever, in the last several years, seen state attorney generals who have become increasingly partisan on many issues join together on one issue. So this is very unusual to have that level of unity, as well as, I believe, 60 tribes filed amicus brief in the same case, or in the same, basically on the same issue. So as well as others. So you've got, I think that's just a sign of the level of concern. The other observation is, although you have prediction markets, you have sweeps, you have pure offshore, these are all different flavors of the same product of trying to create a gambling product that evades traditional regulation. That is an innovation. That's evading the law. And, we'll continue to see some other types, I'm sure, as we go. But make no mistake about it, this is an attempt to begin to pull the threads out from the gaming regulatory system by overwhelming it with all of these, different, like the drones and the air cover coming in from all these different marketplaces. But It's all the same store of illegal gambling. It's just which flavor can you find that will work for a while, and it makes the defense difficult. In effect, you've got this kind of iron dome taking place between the American Gaming Association, the attorney generals, the tribes, and it's been quite effective at this point. But Trace is the expert on prediction markets. I'll let him speak to that.
I don't know if I'm an expert on it, but I mean, I
You
think that
you are now for purposes of that.
I am now for this purposes.
Hold on, could somebody change his headline to sweepstake expert?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think all of what Howard said is exactly right. I mean, I've been doing this for a number of years now, and that it is we mentioned whack-a-mole. In some ways, it's a whack-a-mole in that you see this constant evolution of alleged innovation where the bottom line is how can we create a real money gambling experience and get it to the public without having to go through the licensing and paying the licensing fees and the suitability requirements and the compliance costs and the responsible gaming initiatives and paying gaming taxes and all of the things that you're required to do by law. And so over the last however many years, you've seen this just massive proliferation of unregulated products that some have been more successful than others. Obviously, you have sweepstakes where they're creating a real money gambling experience, providing iGaming in most cases where it's not explicitly legalized, but doing so under this alleged sweepstakes model. You see it on the ground in states across the country, in bars and gas stations and restaurants, with the proliferation of these so-called, skill game machines that look and function exactly like a slot machine, but the proprietors claim that there's some element of skill required in order to win, and thus it's not an actual gambling device, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes states have been effective in combating that. Sometimes they haven't been. But again, let's put slot machines in a 7-Eleven that are unregulated and untaxed and exploit a loophole. And then this is the whole prediction market thing is interesting. And again, there's some smart people out there. Hey, the CFTC, what a federal regulatory. How many folks in the gaming space have engaged with the CFTC prior to this? I mean, I don't know how many people thought, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission that was ostensibly created in order to regulate the moving of contracts of wheat or corn or whatever it was, is all of a sudden going to be authorizing contracts on the outcome of sporting events. I mean, it's a very crazy transition that I don't think anybody really saw coming until it became more clear earlier this year, and the hypocrisy to say, well, in the election betting thing that this is just elections. We have no interest in sports. Sports is not what we're going to get into because it blah blah. And then all of a sudden they got into sports. So it's just a different offshoots, except this one is a little bit different because obviously they claim they're regulated or supposed to be regulated federally. And so whereas with skill games or with sweepstakes or whatever, it's more of a state by state basis. In the prediction market case, obviously it affects all 50 states because of federal preemption issues if that's the way that it ends up going. So and the last point I made to your point, Jason, regarding these amicus briefs is that it all kind of got back to what we mentioned earlier with sweepstakes in a lot of these different states. You have a unified legal gaming industry, and you have tribes weighing in because their tribal sovereignty is being trampled on. And when stakeholders see that, it sends a powerful message because there's not that much that you can get a lot of people on board with. And when you do have that, it does send a powerful message. Well, as you saw in New Jersey yesterday, in the Third Circuit, the 60 plus tribes. I mean, this is an enormous outpouring of support by the tribes. We filed an amicus brief as well. The AGA did in support of the state, and then again, being at the Attorney General Alliance conference right now, like 34 state attorneys general signing on to an amicus brief, red, blue, purple, and otherwise states, is really an emphatic statement because they realized that these prediction markets would essentially upturn and overturn the entire state regulated sports betting industry that has been created over the last 7 years. And in the states where they have decided to not do so, that's fine. But until so, you can't let these guys just wander on in there. And the states that have, it would completely turn that entire structure on its head. And so it was a really strong showing of support in New Jersey. I think it was critically important, before the appeals court to get these arguments in from so many, again, diverse interests. I mean, the AGA and the tribes, and problem gambling and state AGs. It was really good to see, and maybe hopefully this is the instance that might turn the tide a little bit on this, because I think we have a really compelling case to make, and I sure as hell think the tribes have a really compelling case to make, because the tribal arguments are a little different than potential commercial operators or whatever the case may be, and I think the tribal arguments in this matter are particularly strong. So cautiously optimistic, and we'll see what happens.
I read the amicus brief on the flight home last night. I was up in Washington yesterday, and it was a great read. It was a great read. I told Joe Webster that they should option it to Netflix. So, but it just feels like yesterday was like something happened yesterday where everybody kind of, and it's become a states' right things. It's become is this little. Listen, when I first saw the CFTC, I didn't know what it meant either, and I totally got the F word wrong, totally. When it's now becoming a states' right thing, you're starting to see the states saying, "Look at this, little bureaucrats are going to override our rights to." So, and I saw someone talking about it's become federalism. They're trying to push federalism over the states and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see the arguments that are coming out. I think they're becoming more nuanced, and everybody understands now what the threat is. And by the way, you guys have been doing this for a year. Jason and I have just got on board in like October. So, but like the states, we were shocked too. It was happening under our own nose. And when we went and did our presentation in California, the tribes in California were shocked. And so everybody is aware now what's going on. This isn't a mystery or a secret anymore. You know what I mean? So it feels like the momentum shifted yesterday for sure. So how many more amicus briefs do I got to read?
Yeah.
I want to read yours. Trey, send me yours. I want to read it for sure.
Read one, you read them all.
Sure.
You read them all.
Right.
Yeah, I'll send you it over, Victor.
Yeah.
Great entertaining read.
So Jason, that was amazing yesterday. It was amazing. Yeah. A lot of hard work. You're seeing change. I think the Kalshi thing was just fascinating. You know what I mean? Because like you said, you saw those meetings. It was like the thumb was on the scale. You're getting rolled. Here it comes. Get ready. You know what I mean? And the states are saying, no, this is going to go in a much deeper. And I don't think the Kalshi guys expected this. Especially to get punched in the mouth like they did yesterday at this level, at the state level. But their arguments needs to change now.
And there's still layers. I mean, we haven't won anything yet in
certainly
prediction market, but there's still layers of interested parties that still we haven't heard from, and that's the farm community and the agriculture community. I mean, they didn't sign up for their main regulatory body to be involved in gambling, or even these questionable public policy contracts on elections, with the weather. And eventually, there's going to be, contracts on just terrorism events or things you just wouldn't want us as a society to be betting on. And so we've got a little way to go. And AGA has been great in getting the word out, helping us get it out, because it has been a slog, Victor. I'm glad 60 tribes joined. That's frankly, I consider that low. And there's about 270 plus gaming tribes in America right now. If we have more time, and we will have more time, we'll get them all on there eventually. It's just, when the tribe first hears about this, you start swimming in acronyms and CFTC. What does agriculture have to do with anything?
F means futures, by the way. F means futures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wrong.
it's been a tough topic to get across. We dedicated 2.5 days of our trade show to it at the membership meeting, and people still came back and said, we haven't heard anything about this. And it's like, well, so we'll keep hammering, and we need our partners like the AGA and our regional tribal organizations to get the word out. But I think this sweepstakes momentum definitely helps over on the prediction market side as well. And it was funny because when I was at the National Association of Gaming Regulators, the state regulators gave a presentation on it. A lot of them were just assuming I was talking about the sweepstakes stuff. Oh, this is all part of the sweepstakes. And it's like, no, this is another separate issue. So
there's a multi-pronged war that we're at on so many different fronts.
There's so much innovation; it's just inundating us.
Overwhelming innovation.
So much.
But anyway, I appreciate you guys coming on today to help clarify some of this. Howard, thanks for your comments, and the AGA was there with me at the NAGRA conference, and she was great, and you know how tough it is if you're a nonprofit organization and you've got all these interests. We've been there ourselves in some of the land and the trust issues where we've got one tribe that is on the other side of another tribe, and we have to navigate those roads. And so I know it's hard for AGA, if you've got folks that are looking to get into that space. But I think it comes down to we've got to trust our regulators and trust what we've done public policy wise on this throughout the nation. So, and I don't think any states, should cede an inch on this because we don't need the National Gaming Control Board or something. Every state is different, and that's what it comes down to, this federalist system. So, thanks again, guys. Howard, I appreciate you coming on.
You bet. Very well said, Jason. That was a great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys, thank you so much. It just, for a while there, it just felt very frustrating. It was like, we were going to get run over, and but as soon as you start going, you just knew this thing wasn't going to stick. It just was ridiculous. And someone put up there,
help, right, Victor?
Yeah, someone says, so when a state eliminates sweeps, where do you find the players go? Offshore? No, sweepstakes. You don't need the money to play sweeps. It's innovative. That's the whole point. You're playing sweeps, so it's going to be like Candy Crush. So you and your mom can still play sweeps. You know what I mean? So, that's what's going to happen. When the money's gone, you go, so we still have a ways to go. And you're absolutely right, Jason. We haven't won anything. I think the inertia has shifted,
Yeah.
And I think what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday was a big day, guys, and we appreciate all of the collaboration with all of you guys, and look forward to doing it more because, again, not to sound like a broken record, but the unifying aspect of this entire thing is extremely important, whether it's sweepstakes, whether it's prediction markets, whatever the case may be. And so, I feel like, certainly on the sweep side, we've made good progress. There were, some of the initial meetings that we had with gaming regulators. Some of them were like, yeah, we're on top of it. We're already actively investigating, and others, not so much. But that educational aspect of it was critical, and I think you can always educate more, but the work is still yet to be finished. So there's still a lot to be done. We're going to keep fighting, with you guys on both fronts. And we have good momentum. And frankly, the facts are on our side. And so you hope at the end of the day that the folks that determine these things, that are entrusted to determine these things and make these decisions, end up on the right side. And I think, on the sweep side of things, it's been positive so far. With prediction markets, it's yet to be seen. But, just keep doing the work and appreciate all that you guys do. And we'll continue to partner with you guys, both in California, but, broadly speaking, because, tribal sovereignty is critical and is being violated in each of these cases. And so, Appreciate your guys' leadership, and we're going to keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you for
Listen,
those.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both. You both have been amazing. I think next time we have you, we're gonna talk about hotel rooms and traveling since you guys have put so many miles. I want to know how much you guys have traveled because every time I call you, you're somewhere different. And so you guys are just real champions, and I'm proud of you both and glad to call you both my friends. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. Everyone else, thank you guys. We'll be back next week,
Thanks,
and
Thank
we'll
you,
talk
guys.
to you then.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.